Hello, welcome to Lovin Sheila, the podcast. Today, we're going to get into part 2 of our discussion with Dr. Lee Baucom on Save the Marriage. I hope you enjoyed part 1, and if you haven't seen it yet, go back and visit us. It's episode 47. We're going to talk more about saving the marriage and how you do it and when you shouldn't do it and when is it too late to save the marriage. We're going to talk about that on this episode. Before we go any further, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. We're going to have lots of interesting and informative content for you. Let's get right back to it as we resume our conversation with Dr. Lee Baucom. Now we're picking up the conversation where Dr. Baucom and I have just discussed the 3 layers of connection: emotional, physical, and spiritual. And now I want to delve a little bit deeper into that. Let's find out what happens in a relationship when one or more of those layers are missing. Let's pick up the conversation with Dr. Lee Baucom. Can they still be in a healthy relationship when one of those is missing? Like, can you still thrive if one of those levels are missing or layers?
Survive.
Yes.
Right, but thriving is a different matter. I do think that strong relationships have. So I was on another podcast and a person said, well, what if it's a sexless marriage? And I'm like, if both people are good with that, there are lots of other ways of having physical affection, but physical connection is still important. Mm-hmm. We happen to know biologically that people need touch, period, in order to be healthy. So that it's very hard to feel like you're strong in a marriage if you don't feel like your spouse gets you or supports you, or and vice versa. The one that's often missing, that spiritual one, it means they lose track of what are their core values, what's truly important to them. Mm-hmm. And then it's hard to kind of figure out where to go from there. A lot of times we just think that we said that at one time, so we're on the same thing. I'm not who I was when we fell in love in our early 20s. I'm a different person then. I hope that's not I hope. I know my wife is, because we have those conversations about what's now important to us. But a lot of people forget that piece. And so sometimes people will say, well, we connect well here, but we miss the other 2. That's a very common one. Sometimes I hear people go, oh, we have 2 of those, but now I see where we're weak. Mm-hmm. People are connecting all 3. They're not likely to be talking to me. If they are connecting on those 3 levels and they have a strong sense of being a we, I'm probably not going to hear from them.
Another thing I noticed you talked about, and I did this in my marriage. Sometimes we would decide we're going to have a talk. We're going to talk about these things. So we got together or sent emails or whatever, and we talked. And I used to call it, he was giving me new rules, like, unfortunately. So my experience was, I learned that I'm kind of stubborn, but I learned that when I was having these talks, I would find myself really like obstinate, not really moving, not yielding. And so what is your recommendation for those of us who have these relationship talks?
Yeah, so relationship talks are often kind of therapy without the therapist, right? You explain to somebody why they're doing what they're doing, not so much why I'm doing what I'm doing, right? I'm looking at where I can put the blame, and so you get stuck in that pattern. I often tell people that they can either talk about their relationship or they can relate. But it's not likely that when you're talking about your relationship, you're actually relating. You're kind of going back to this very intellectualized, well, at least we think it's intellectualized. It's usually a rationalized approach, right? And you're missing being truly involved. Is it important to have conversations about the relationship? Yes, for the sake of the relationship, not because I want to be right, but because we want to further. It's like conflict. Conflict because I want to win is never going to get there. And so what you were doing is a defensive posture, right? When you step back, that's a defensive posture of going, I'm not going to be pulled along. And that tells me that somewhere in there was a tug of war going on about whose way is the right way rather than what is our way, what is the path we want to take.
Yes, learning a lot about that part, building that now, here's another thing I want to ask you. It's kind of like on the outside of this, but as I struggle, and I hear people talk about this all the time, okay, because we're going to get to your system, but I know a lot of people are using this five love languages and the love tank and all that. And even when I was separated with my husband, he started sharing because we had gone to a workshop on love languages and all. And so he started sharing with me how his love tank wasn't full and what I could do. And I really was like, are you kidding me? I mean, like, that's the least of our concerns, because I felt like there was elements of abuse and things like that in it. And so I was like, I can't even think about love tank and gifts and, touch and all that kind of stuff because I'm hurting. How is that even something that can be incorporated into like saving the marriage?
It can be, except for he weaponized it.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. Okay.
So Gary Chapman, he and I have had conversations, and his thing is not so much of trying to convince your spouse to speak your love language as much as you speaking your spouse's love language and hearing theirs, right? When the way they share their love, becoming bilingual of understanding and sharing in their language. He never is about trying to get your spouse to speak yours, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the reverse of that. So it's about, can I understand how my wife is speaking my love language or speaking her love language, that I need to be able to go, oh, that's love. That's what you're doing there. I missed that. That's love. And to be able to go, okay, how can I speak to that? And if
Right.
both people are doing that, that's really strong. What your ex did was weaponize that to try to make you do what he wanted. That's a whole different approach.
Okay. All right. That actually makes sense. And this is, I got some questions from our listeners. Okay, a couple questions, but the first one is a question from our host, right? This is it. I've noticed in my opinion, a big movement toward life partnerships. Like people talk about I'm looking for a life partner and all, and not really a spouse. They want to build life partnerships and they really omit marriage. And I'm just, do you notice that as well? Like, is that a phenomena that's going on?
Oh, it is statistically. Fewer people are getting married, and they're getting married later in life.
Okay.
And I think that is because they've watched the damage that happens in broken marriages. The thing is that when you're doing that and you're still setting that up as a lifelong piece, I mean, even if you don't do the marriage thing, you still have the same risk of that, right? If you bring kids into the world, you still have the same risk of disagreeing, of hitting the pause button and everything else. But yes, it is a trend. For good or bad. I mean, some people have said, well, that if you're not careful, we're going to ruin marriage in our country. I'm like, well, married people are doing a good job of
Good
doing that
job.
anyway, when half of them are ending anyway, right? So, it's what I talk about is as applicable in a long term. We see this as an ongoing relationship, as in a marriage. There is a difference in the legality of what happens when you say I do for life.
Mhm.
Psychologically, that does make a shift that some people don't see coming.
Yeah. I mean, immediately when I got married, it wasn't the same. I mean, and not in a necessarily bad way, just the feeling I had toward the relationship just changed. It evolved into something different. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Now, this is a question from my listener. He says, why is communication in marriage so difficult and why does it often turn into arguments?
Because it comes out of disconnection. If you're disconnected, so communication is a method of delivery. We're delivering stuff, right? Data. And so the data is what's important in that. And if you're disconnected, your communication is going to be much more from a me versus you perspective. So communication is a symptom. When communication is not happening, it's a symptom of the disconnection. If you're connected, communication flows much, much better.
Okay, okay. And then the last one is, um, why do women get bored in relationships, in marriage with good men? And he furthered this by saying some women need emotional stimulation, meaning problems, in order to be engaged,
Yeah, well,
connected.
I mean, I think all of us need two things in life: certainty and variety, right? And that's it, how it comes out is different, but this has been demonstrated in the drives of human, that we need both certainty and variety. And the problem is sometimes we do get stuck in certainty, and that's boring, and variety, and that's overwhelming, right? And so there is a balance. And that often raises the question of, are we actually doing the growing we need to do, or are we stagnant? Are we stuck? And is somebody trying in a not helpful way to de-stick, right? To de-stagnate?
And what type of abuse is present? Should we not consider saving a marriage?
Well, if there's abuse,
Okay.
period. If there is abuse, I don't think you save the marriage because personal safety, we have to start there. The relationship cannot be safe if the people don't feel safe. So I in fact ask people not to use my material if they are in abusive relationships. And when somebody contacts me, I'm like, please contact this to get some
Okay.
resources to help you. You need to be safe. Now, is it possible after that, if the person actually goes through a process of figuring out what's driving that within them?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, but that is not the starting point. The starting point is to make sure the individual is safe. Some people want me to define abuse, and unfortunately, that's such a very specific. If there is physical abuse, period. That
Right.
not negotiating that. If there is what somebody says emotional abuse, that probably is something it's not probably, that's something they ought to explore with somebody who is seasoned in helping people through abuse. Because sometimes I hear people say, well, they told me it wasn't really abuse. They were just, calling me names. I'm like, I mean, that pretty quickly escalates, right? So
Mm.
abuse is something that often escalates unless there's intervention, and the intervention in a marriage is to say, I can't continue in this. Um, Unfortunately, for a lot of people, abuse is a creeping thing, right? It starts small and they miss the pieces along the way. But when they find that, when they realize they're there, that's the time to get safety, not to try to negotiate.
Okay, got it. And what are some mistakes that we commonly make when we're trying to save our marriage?
The big one is chasing. The when we have this pattern that we've often talked about of the pursuer distancer in
Hmm.
psychology. I call it the chaser spacer, right? Just for lingo. So the spacer is the one who's like, I need some distance here, and the chaser is like, we're going to make this connection. Like we're going to have date night. We're going to do these things, and the relationship is not capable of holding that connection. So you're going from no connection to let's do this intimate dinner, holiday, vacation, big gift, whatever it is, something that's going to a marriage intensive, for instance, is another one.
Hmm.
It just can't hold that level of intimacy and connection.
Okay.
And so they're chasing. And whenever you chase, you're going to face. My dog in the backyard, if I go out to try to bring her in, she loves running
Yes.
from me, right? And that's the same
Yes.
thing that's happening. They're just running away from that. And so that's a pattern that's very common. It just can't hold it. So you have to pace. You have to find ways of being invitational in the connection. That's a big one. Whenever I hear somebody say, how do I make, get, or cause my spouse to come back to me? That's a problem. Those are words of a chaser, right? So
Okay.
if you find yourself going make, get, cause, force, coerce, any of those words, you're going down the wrong aisle.
Got it. Got it. Okay. And before we get into the meat and potatoes of this, I think, when is it too late? I want to get all this out the way and then get right into when is it too late to try and save? Is it ever too late?
That's a great question. So people will often say to me, if you can guarantee me that I can save my marriage, I'm going to give everything you say a try.
Hmm.
My response is, I can guarantee you, if you do not put effort of what's going to happen, it's the only way to find out if it's too late well, there are two ways. One is to say it's too late because I'm not willing to do anything. And if the other person, so it's kind of an up down vote, right? If both people are going, nope, we're
Right.
done. It doesn't matter what I say or anybody else says, you're done. There's just no route back. There's nobody who's pushing that. The only other way to find out is if you're going, yep, I think I would like to try, is to put forth the effort.
Okay.
That's the only way to determine that. And so I always say that my goal is to help people save and restore their relationship. That is my goal. At a bare minimum, what I want people to be able to do is to say, I did everything I could. I did
Yeah.
my best. I don't have regrets. I don't stare at the mirror and go, why didn't you do that earlier? And that's to me, it's not a bad place to end. If you're at the place where you go, I feel good about what I did. Maybe you don't feel good about what happened back there, but I feel good about how I tried to save our relationship. That's better than the regrets of I should have done something.
Okay. Okay. And tell me about the system, the Save the Marriage system.
Yeah, so I try to do the spectrum of from the crisis to we're just chronically there. So the crisis program is the Save the Marriage system. The We're Chronically on Pause is the Unpause app. So the system is designed for people who realize their marriage is in crisis and they realize that they are the ones who are kind of carrying the freight right now for that, carrying the weight of trying. That's what that's about. And it started out as really just one module, and now is several modules, 5 modules that I basically created as I found people stuck at different points. You're stuck there. Let's figure out a way around that. And that became another module. And it has options for coaching and other pieces to it. But it's basically to help people understand what happened in their marriage and what the path forward is and how to deal when the spouse is still resistant to that, right? So that's kind of that approach. A lot of people find themselves at the place though where they're just paused and they're just like, I don't know what to do here. The Unpause app is for people to say, this is where we are and this is how to get unstuck. Now, a lot of people can't tell the difference. And so I have an assessment. It's called the GPS assessment. It helps people to figure out whether they are a green light, a yellow light, or a red light on the process. The red light doesn't mean there's no chance. It just means that there's lots in the way of that, right? And there are some red lights we've already talked about. Abuse, that's a red light. But there are other red lights of going, wow, my spouse is really resistant and reactive. Yellow light is my spouse is resistant, but we're still able to communicate. Green light is absolutely we can get this done. So I actually have a spot that they can find links to all 3 of those at savethemarriage.com/podcast. Since we're talking on a podcast, savethemarriage.com/podcast has links to all 3 of those pieces. So that if you know you're in a crisis, Save the Marriage system. If you know you're chronically paused and you want to get away from that, that's the Unpause app. And if you're really not sure what's going on in a relationship and where it stands, then you can have an assessment that's there that can help you along.
Wow, this all sounds incredibly helpful. It's well thought out. I'm glad. It's nice to have someone who's done the work like you, so we can kind of just jump in and see where we are and start working on our relationships and our marriages. And I appreciate you. I appreciate everything. I'm totally engulfed in your podcast at this point. I just get on the treadmill, I just listen and just go one after another because it's very thought-provoking, and it's good information to take into new relationships, I think, and just making sure that you form, like what I said was important, the emotional framework for relationships as we move forward. Because I can testify that divorce is very painful. And I said it before, it's like it's easy to go to the court and get divorced, but the lingering effect, the aftermath takes so much time. So if we can go into relationships and build, informed and have a good framework and then stay engaged and not push pause, I think we can all have better, more successful and happier marriages. And I appreciate your work. I'm very grateful. I enjoyed our conversation.
It was a great conversation.
Yes, it was a great conversation. So thank you for joining me. And yes, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching part 2 of our conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. There's so much to learn. There's so much good information. I found myself wanting to take notes, but then I realized I can always watch the podcast. So watch it, rewatch it, glean as much as you can from it, and let's work to have healthy, strong marriages. And even these are also things that you can apply in any long-term relationship. So let's work toward having strong foundations, a good emotional framework for moving forward in relationships, and staying connected and becoming the we so that we can maintain our relationships, that we can prevent any marital pauses, and we can have healthy, strong relationships with longevity. And don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share. There's a lot of people out there who need to hear this information. Go to savethemarriage.com where you can get more information. This is just the tip of the iceberg, but there's so much more. So visit Dr. Lee at savethemarriage.com. Thank you. Bye for now.